Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, I'm going to talk about, what I want to do in 2021, a little direction, maybe a little advice, maybe a rant or two, but I don't think so. I'll try not to do that. So stay tuned right after this. It's always good to start over on a new year and start to think about where you've been, where you want to take things. And so I started thinking about what I wanted to do with the channel and going back to what I had originally intended. Yes, I do write goals once in a while. It's always good to have those as where the goals are the formation of where you want to go and how you want to get there. But more importantly, what is the type of thing that you want to do with your channel? And so I started looking back at mine, and it's kind of a collection of a mess. It isn't that I don't mind doing reviews on distributions. I think that is a worthy thing to do, but I think there's probably a little bit too much of that. It really wasn't what I really wanted to accomplish, and it's always a good idea to take a look back at first and say, why? Why did I create this channel? I created this channel, and this is what I had said originally, was to give back to the community. I don't want to do a death by PowerPoint tonight. I'll put up some key things and I'll talk about them, but I really want to tell you a story. So a lot of the times during my life, there have always been people that I was friends with in the workplace. Maybe it was a customer, maybe it was a colleague, but in the progress of talking things over and learning about stuff and what was going on, because the fastest way that I can learn by doing. I mean, that is the quickest way to get to a path. Taking a book or going to a class, oh my God, that's so slow. It takes forever to get to an end result. And so what I wanted to do with this was, so many people have helped me along the way that I wanted to provide an avenue to give back. And so that really is my why for this channel. And I want to get back to that. I want to make sure that I'm doing what I had originally set out to do. So the other thing that I see a lot, and if I talk to other YouTubers, I don't get that sense of community. It's more of a sense of competition. And I don't view that. I view other YouTubers that talk about the same area as I do as competitors. I consider them as colleagues. That we may all have different channels, and we may all say different things, and we may all disagree with each other, and that's great. That's how good ideas bubble up in the first place. So a rising sea floats all boats, and that's kind of the way I look at things. So if you're another YouTuber that has a channel, great. I mean, you're not my competitor, and I'm not yours. What we're trying to do together is to try to promote and make sure that we are at least in sync and giving good advice. I mean, that is really the crux of any good channel, is to make sure that you're giving good advice to other people. So the first place, that is my first outlook on things. It has always been my outlook on things. I never considered colleagues at work to be competitors. It's not because I didn't compete with them. Sure, we all compete with one another, but I don't sit in the same box that they do. I don't think the same way they do. So it isn't my concern to be worrying about them. And I also don't worry too much about rules. Rules are meant to be broken. I mean, that's been my approach to life my whole time. In this industry, in the computer world, let me tell you a story. So a story is that I was working for Burroughs at the time. This was probably back in the 80s. And they wanted to get into the service business. And so, I had worked with customers on site. I was an engineer. I was a system engineer. I would come on site. I would help them with problems. We'd sit down and figure out code together to make it work, and whatever they were trying to make something happen. Or if they needed knowledge in a certain subject area that they just didn't know anything about, but were willing to learn a little bit more about, maybe it was a different product that Burroughs sold, maybe it was a database engine, maybe it was a way to automate their data entry, whatever it was back then. I mean, it was different sets of criteria and different things that people were trying to do, but it was more of, playing off of each other and trying to get things to work. Well, that informal environment usually develops some really amazing code. And Burroughs decided to standardize, and so they came in with, I guess, a bunch of consultants from one of the big three accounting firms, and they proceeded to tell us how we were going to do project management. You know, the typical waterfall model of how to document this and document that, document yourself to death. And processes are put in place when corporations fail to do something, when they fail at something. And 3 months prior to this, Burroughs had gone into, I'm not going to say the name of the customer or the salespeople that promoted it, but basically they oversold a machine's capability in a particular application. They installed it. It failed because it wasn't able to keep up with the number of transactions that this particular customer needed. So instead of punishing the guilty, they punish everybody, and they punish us with this process that they put in place that we had to now follow. So if I sat down with a customer, I had to have a project. I had to have a project manager. I had to have somebody that was involved with it. It was just a totally unnecessary overhead. And we sort of circumvented that. And instead of making it look like a project, it was more of a consult. That's the way I would write it up, because then I could bypass the project management rules of the company. If I just said, no, I'm not working on it, I'm just consulting, I'm just giving advice. And so that worked out pretty well. At least it saved me hours and hours of writing up stuff that had to be approved by some manager up the chain. It was just goofy and stupid. And a lot of those processes are really designed to soak up your time. And so, I just didn't want to do that. So what's next? So the other one is, I always loved this book. It was probably the best book I ever had read on Fortran. Fortran is not my favorite language, but it is a language that I had to learn for several customers, and this particular book was a great way of learning it. It intermixed humor and stories, and it had some funny anecdotes in it. It wasn't just a boring manual on how to do Fortran coding, but at the end of it, I learned how to program in Fortran. So the thing is that the thing to remember is about anything in life is that you want to color outside the lines. If you're always obeying the rules of the organization and following the path and doing exactly what you're told to do, then all you are is just one of many. So you're a pawn in the game. Some people call it minions. I call it pawn. I always have. You don't want to be in that position, because then all you're viewed as is the guy that will do everything that nobody else wants to do, and that's not the place to be in an organization. So another task that we had was we had these periodic reports that we had to make. So if we found a bug in the operating system, we had to file these reports to the people at the plant and tell them about this particular problem, and then they would come back with a fix. Well, it was interesting to do all that, but the amount of paperwork that grew onto that over a period of maybe 2 or 3 years just got worse and worse and worse. So finally, I decided that instead of writing up all this stuff, I would just call I knew who the developers were, so I just would call them up directly and say, I found this bug. Found this problem, and it's in the operating system. It's when you do this thing. Go check it out, and I'll walk you through it. And so I would walk the developer through the problem, and they would say, "Oh crap, you're right. This is definitely a problem." And I said, "Yeah, and I've got to write this up. I'm going to have to send it to my manager. He's going to have to send it to his manager. It's got to go up through the chain to Detroit, and then Detroit's going to have to send it to you." And he's like, "Oh my God, please don't do that, because that causes all kinds of problems for us here in the plant." So. Instead, he said, "Oh, how about if I just send you a fix for this? Let me work on this. I'll give you a fix. I'll send it to you via fax or whatever, and you can just paper patch it in." We had ways to do that. So That's what we did. We just avoided hours and hours of work. So I don't always follow the rules. Sometimes if you find a process that you just can't stand doing, just work around and find a better way to handle it so that it gets fixed. It got into the code base, and I mean the problem, and they would do patch updates out to the field. So other people knew that this was a problem, and they would enter the patch and fix it. So it was actually a better mechanism than going through all that nonsense. It would probably have taken weeks to get through the chain to get this thing fixed. And meanwhile, I have a customer here that has a machine that's blowing up on them occasionally. And that isn't a goal. That's not a goal that you want. So anyway, so that's one of the other things that you look for. So, all right. So certifications. I want to talk about this one. So there are quite a few people on YouTube that talk about doing certifications in different areas. Like, you need this, you need this, you need this. Certification. So my view on certification has always been, those are great monuments to the status quo, but that is not a desired fact, a desired trait in an employee that I would look for. I mean, just because you have the certification, number one, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know the material. You might know the material for the test, but you don't know the material well enough to do the job, because it has to be like muscle memory. It has to become part of what you do without even thinking about it. So it's the wrong kind of study. It takes way too much time to get through a certification course. And if you look at I've looked at some of the sample questions, and I'm sure you have too. Oh my God, they're just a study in minutia. I mean, who cares? I mean, almost all those questions you could look up do a Google search on it. If you needed to know how to do something, you could Google search it in less time than it would take to go through the course. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So it's not teaching you the right kinds of things. The point is that if you're going to take a learning activity on, make sure that it's in something that is a hot trend. That's number one. So you need to identify where those trends are occurring in your particular field. So if you're a database admin, what's happening with databases that you need to know about? Or maybe databases are going away, and they are going away, thank God. But the other areas are maybe what's hot. Where do you need to be? So if you look at that, and there's never going to be any certifications in new areas. So you don't need certifications if you're working in something new, because no one's bothered to certify it or written up anything. So the other part about that is that if you're in a hot area, you're a hot talent. You're somebody they want to keep, they want to pay, they want to keep happy. And maybe it's something that you like, and if it isn't something you like, you can always move on to something else. There's more than one trend that always hits this industry. And the top ones right now are hybrid cloud, AI, machine learning, and still, believe it or not, analytics is still huge. And so if those are areas that are of interest to you, I mean, IoT, for better or for worse, that is also a hot area, and it will remain so for at least the next few years. So if any of those areas are of interest to you, you're not going to find certifications in those areas. You're going to find certifications in the status quo. If that's where you want to get married and you want to be a part of that status quo, great. Go be a dinosaur, because I guarantee you that's where your company will view you. And as long as they have those things they have to support, they'll use you. But the minute that changes and they get rid of that particular thing, where's your job going to be? And so that's why I'm not a big proponent of certifications. Direction. So sometimes it's the journey that teaches you a lot about your destination. And I have certainly changed my direction several times. Sometimes if you stop and think about it, if you want to go to a destination that you've never been to before, and you get in your car, what's the first thing you do? You look up the address, right? And then you punch it into your phone, and it comes up with the streets that you can go, gives you some choices on how to get there. Maybe shows you the traffic. Maybe you don't want all the traffic. Maybe you're trying to avoid that. And it'll show you ways around all that. So you got to know where you're trying to get to. And if you don't know what that is, your company isn't going to help you. I mean, they're going to let you drift along with them, and you'll be just somebody that does the work and isn't really that important to the way things work in your particular field. So it's always a good idea to ask yourself, is this the current path that you're walking? Is that where you want to be? Sometimes you may find that, and I certainly have done this in my career. I knew where I wanted to go. I mean, my goal has always been to understand as much as possible about how computers work. And sometimes companies would try to push me into management. Wasn't interested in management. Sometimes I would have to take a step back. Sometimes I would have to take a job with less pay in order to reach the direction I wanted, because the career paths that are in place in most organizations for technical usually end up in management. And sometimes you have to bypass that, but you need to have a broader breadth of skills, like, I don't know, maybe let's say that your organization writes software. So a developer background is always good, right? But that's not going to keep you on a path to your destination. Maybe what you want to be is the CTO. Let's say that that's your goal. Yeah, aim high. You may miss, but you're going to land on something that's higher up than where you are. So maybe you want to be the CTO. Let's say that that's your goal. So, and what does a CTO need to know? That's the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what does a CTO need to know? Well, they need to know trends. They need to understand direction. They need to understand cost savings. They need to there's all of these elements that go into that. But they're really setting the direction for the computing platforms, services, employees, training, mentorship, all of those things. Those people, that's their job, right? That they're setting the direction, the broad-based direction. If they fail, their chair is going to be vacant. I guarantee you, they're those people that are not successful in that don't last very long. So those jobs could open up pretty quickly, and you may have to gain a knowledge in an area that doesn't really interest you, but maybe you can find something in there that you'd like to do, and maybe then you can work to get rid of the processes that you don't like to do. So, and that makes the organization more efficient, because processes are not designed to create efficiency. They're designed to cover past sins. So anyway, that's my advice for that one. So the other thing is that if someone comes up to you and they say, describe your job, what do you do? And then you have to think about it, you kind of hum and haw, and you go, if you have to hum and haw about what you're doing, you're probably not in the right spot. And if the first thing that pops into your mind is the amount of money you make, as you are definitely not in the right spot. It's not something that's firing you. It's not getting you up in the morning. It's not making you want to excel and be better at what you do. So my advice is that if you find yourself in that position, then you're out of alignment with whatever it is your direction is really needed to be for you. I don't know what that is. I mean, only you can answer that question. I know what mine is, but I don't know what yours would be. So you have to stop and ask yourself, is this the direction I want to take? Is this the part of the company I want to work in? And does this company that I currently work in offer me the particular things that I'm interested in doing? I mean, back to story time. So I was working for, I had told you the story, I was working for Burroughs, and Burroughs had decided to shut down the branch offices in the smaller cities and move them all up to the large cities, which means that there would be fewer people to cover the amount of accounts that they had in the smaller areas, because the closer you are to them, the more they will work you. You know, the more the customers will come to trust you and use you and make you a part of their team. But if you're 3 hours or 4 hours away, that's not somebody they can call very easily to have come out and work on stuff. So that direction wasn't good for me, to move to a larger city. I just wasn't interested in doing that. And besides, it would mean more time on the road. It would mean only working with larger customers, because that is the tendency of those larger metropolitan areas. They give service to larger customers, and the smaller ones, well, here's the phone number, call somebody that cares, right? So, and it really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I decided to go over to, and Digital Equipment Corporation was around back then, and so I decided to go over there first and put my application in. And I went in for an interview, and they called me back for a second one, and I went and I talked to the manager, and And I asked some questions about the job, but I was like, I'm not really hearing what I wanted to hear here. But I I made a wrong choice because I was I had internal pressure to keep working and making money and supporting my family, right, as we all do. So I took the job, and on the first day on the work, they gave me a cube that was about this wide. I kid you not, it was that wide and about this deep. It had a single machine on it and a keyboard and a monitor, and that was about the width of it. And you might have had enough space for maybe a tablet or something. And what we were supposed to do was sit and write documentation all day long. That, if I had known that that was going to be the job description, and I had asked for it, but he didn't really have one at the time of the interview. So I lasted there a month, and I was like, no, I'm not interested in doing this. This is not in alignment with my direction on where I want to go. Writing documentation is, boring. That's pretty boring to me. But I am challenged by things that are new, things that are difficult. That challenges me, and that will get me going. I don't know how it is for you. Maybe you're not that way, but in fact, the harder the problem, the more I'm like a moth to a flame. The harder the problem, the brighter the flame, and so the more it attracts me to it. So that's kind of the thing that has always propelled me forward in life. That's what gets me up in the morning. There's some fear about, hey, is this really what I want to do? Is this something that's going to, come back and cause me to fail? That's fine. I mean, I have failed several times. It's all right. You learn from that. The thing is that if you're in a role of being important, in other words, if you're in a role that is considered critical by the company, they're not going to fire you because you failed. You're going to be in an area, and engineers understand this, right? If you're working on something that's brand new, their chances are pretty high, and since no one else has done this before, you're probably going to have a failure or two. You can survive that. Now, if it gets to be a habit and you start getting 3, 4, and 5 failures, well, bye-bye. Have a nice life. But, but occasional failure, that's okay. I mean, that's where you want to be. If you're in routine kinds of operations where things are well understood and there isn't much chance to fail, and you fail there, I guarantee you won't last very long. You'll be gone immediately. Because they could replace you with a donut, seriously. But so that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. I didn't want to take up an awful lot of your time with this, but I did want to come back to the direction of the channel. So am I going to change anything drastically? No, but I am going to try to put in more content to help you build your careers. Taking the learning path is slow. You need to learn from other people that are in your organization that already work in those fields. If you can pair yourself up with and somebody that needs your skill and you need theirs, then there's something in it for them and there's something in it for you. And chances are that mentorship is going to work out. If you're in it where you're just looking for a mentor to help you, good luck. I've never seen that happen yet. I have never seen that happen yet. Corporations want people to mentor because that means that there are more people that understand a particular thing. And they always like that backup. They like that interaction between multiple people so that if something happens and you leave, there's someone that could step in and do your job. But but nobody is going to take the time out of their schedule because corporations don't give you the time to do mentorship. But if it's part and parcel to that person's advantage as well as yours, then you've got a match, right? Then you've got something that works. And if you can find that kind of mentor, that's the kind that will really help you along the path. So that's all I had for today. I hope you enjoyed this. I mean, as far as what I intend to do, is I want to get back to the roots of the channel and make it more of, here are some things that I think that are, what I originally had intended was to throw out ideas. Here's some things that I see as possible trends coming. Here's the things that I think that we should work on together. Present videos explaining those topics to you, maybe gaining your interest in it, and helping you along the way. Does that mean I'm going to stop doing reviews on distributions? No, absolutely not. Or any hardware reviews? No, it doesn't mean that either, because there are so many different facets to this business. I mean, whether it be in operations or automation or cloud or IoT or AI, there's so many different ways to get through this field and learn more about it. Having your head in a book constantly, or going to classes and sitting trying to stay awake while whoever, I mean, I don't know. I've taken a couple of classes recently where about half the time the professor was off talking about something that had nothing to do with the course. And it was like, why are you wasting my time with this garbage? I mean, get back to the point. I'm here to learn about this, not about all these ancillary things. You're taking up time in the course that I just don't have time for. And so that's kind of my position on learning today. I can learn more from a blog post or a website or something else. You might have noticed the last time I did a video, I actually had a website up to find the SE status, because I can never remember that command. I always have to look it up. So, I mean, in 5 minutes, you can find stuff that you need to know to be able to figure out how to present something back. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how people, I know what I went through learning what I had to learn in school, but none of the stuff I took as classes were even viable for what I do today. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I'll leave you with this one last noodle. So it wasn't my degree that ever got me anywhere, because my degree was in forestry. That's an agriculture degree on how to grow trees. And my particular field of interest was in biometrics, which is applied statistics. So, it's being able to figure out how many trees to measure to figure out how much board feet that particular forest is going to produce. It's also looking at how fast the trees are growing. It's all those boring things that help you create sustainable forests. But the thing that people always got to when they saw my resume was that I had worked on Play-Doh. That stopped right there. They saw that I had some experience doing something advanced. I don't know how long that actually helped me, but I would guarantee you it was at least 12 years. So if you can, yes, I was lucky. I happened to be going by by Searle one night and seeing the orange glow in the windows. But there's things like that get thrown in your path that you just kind of don't think about. I mean, you're like, that interests me. If it is something that interests you, don't set it aside. Go pursue it, because that is what's going to spark you. And that's all I have for today. Hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see you all again real soon, and bye for now.